Всем привет, Elvin here. How's everyone doing? So glad to see all of you back. It is time for us to wrap up our shot list series. Today we'll look at the camera movements and also we'll throw in the different types of camera gear or rigs that are used to produce those shots. There's going to be quite a lot of information today, so let's get right into it and I'll try to make this as condensed as possible. Alright, so we'll begin with an item that is considered an essential for all photographers and all filmmakers, and that is the tripod. This three-legged contraption which allows us to place the camera on top of it and lock it in place. It is very handy in photography, especially when you want to make those nice long exposure photos and you know that you will need to slow down your shutter. And as we know, slowing down the shutter will make the camera more sensitive towards movement. So the camera can help to avoid any shake and blurriness. Now in film, usually the shutter speed is locked at double of our frame rate, so a tripod has a little bit of a different use here. First of all, it helps us to create a static shot. A static shot is when the camera does not move whatsoever and our attention, the audience's attention, is drawn by the movement or actions that is happening within that scene. Also, it is very effective if we want to capture the dialogue and the emotion that the character is showing during that scene with no other distractions around. Now, even though a camera is static, it can also move. The second camera movement we'll look at is called panning. This is when we'll move our camera left or right. This is something that is often used with a tripod, and it can be either slow, which will build more anticipation and mystery, or it can be very fast, also known as a whip, which will build more kinetic energy and make things seem faster when they are passing by in our scene. Now, a pan can also follow a character's actions or reveal something within a scene. Now, the third type of movement that is also associated with a tripod is tilting. This is when we'll move the camera upwards or downwards. And this one also showcases the scene or the world, but on a horizontal axis. And this is something very popular in sci-fi movies when we want to showcase more of the environment. Now, it can also be used in combination with low angles and high angles. A tilt up with a low angle will give our characters more superior look, while a tilt down with a high angle will make our characters seem more vulnerable and weak. And the final type of camera movement that can be achieved using a tripod is a zoom. Now, a zoom is like a static shot. The camera doesn't actually move. However, it is the focal length that is moved, that is adjusted either by the camera lens, or we can do this in post. So it kind of fakes the idea of movement. And a zoom can be very slow or can be very fast. A fast zoom is also known as a crash zoom, and this one is purely used for dramatic effects or comic effects. Now, speaking of static equipment, the next one on our list is the overhead mount. This allows us to mount our camera above our heads, making those overhead shots, which gives us more divine look, also allows us to isolate the characters, and also make those POV shots showing the character interacting with some kind of objects and also focusing on the detail of the object. Now, in terms of camera movement, I think the only thing you can associate with this type of rig is a zoom, and most probably in post, since especially if you're alone and you have a camera above you, it's just not really comfortable to adjust it while you're filming, so you would just zoom in post. Now let's add a little bit of flavor to our shot with a rig called the SNORRICAM. I know, it sounds really weird. And basically it is a vest which allows us to place a camera right in front of the face of the character. So it's kind of like this. And what this allows us to do is to isolate the character's face. However, it also gives us a very weird effect because the camera only moves when the body of the actor moves. So it is very unnatural for us. And this is the exact purpose of it. It helps to create the effect of dizziness, drunkenness, or for instance being under some kind of substance. Here is an example of a SNORRICAM shot. Just see how it creates a little bit of an uneasy feeling. And in terms of camera movements, I would call this a random movement. This is also a type of camera shot, and it defines any kind of movement that is irregular. So it's not predefined and can be very random. So this one, and also for instance camera shake. Next we have a dolly. A dolly cam is basically a cart with a camera on it and also an operator usually. It's pushed by one or two people, and this cart moves along rail tracks which are built on set. This is one of the most typical things you're gonna see on a film set. Now this type of rig is very flexible. In other words, if you want to have a static shot, no problem, just leave it as it is, don't move anything and you have your static shot. If you want to tilt up, down, pan left or right, like as if it's on a tripod, you can do that. However, a dolly is more known for its movement, and the camera movements that we're going to be looking at are the push in, pull out, tracking, trucking, arc, and dolly zoom. Starting with the first type of movement, which is the push in. This involves pushing the dolly towards the subject or the object, and this creates more meaning towards that object or subject because our attention is steered towards that place. This is very effective, for instance, in dialogue when we want to highlight the importance of the conversation. So we can slowly move in the camera as, let's say, the tension is increasing as the person is saying whatever he's saying, or for instance we want to capture more the emotions that the character is experiencing while he is either saying something or is about to, let's say, do some kind of action. We can also use a dolly to highlight some kind of important objects or items within a scene that also needs attention. The opposite of a push-in is the pull-out. This is when we are going to be moving the dolly away from the subject or the object. This one is often associated with negative emotions. So exclusion, isolation, abandonment, these kind of shots, because we are going away from the subject or the object. And this helps to create that whole atmosphere. And also it can be used purely to showcase the scene. So we can start quite close and then we can slowly move away, revealing the whole scene or the grandeur of the environment where that action or the scene is happening for, I don't know, epicness, let's say. So there's quite different uses for this one. Then we have tracking. Now if push in and pull out, they just move towards or away from the subject, tracking follows the subject. So we can have a tracking shot behind the character, so the character moves forwards and we're just following him as if we're walking behind him. Or we can be tracking backwards, so we will be moving away while the character is moving in front towards us. Now, a trucking, which is similar name, is when we're going to be following our character sideways, whether he's going left or right, like this scene right here from Sherlock Holmes. This one is called a trucking shot. Now in both cases, the question that arises in the audience's mind is, where are we going? Since there's no indication of where we are going, so we just have to follow the character and then see what happens. Now, next camera movement, which is also very common with a dolly, is a arc movement. This is like in between a tracking shot and a trucking shot. So this is when we're going to be moving our dolly in a circular motion around our character or around our scene. It can be any angle you want. It can be only 90 degrees, 180, 360, as you wish. And it has its own uses. We can use this one to show the environment. And if we have a dialogue of a character, we can just moving the camera around just places him within a 3D environment rather than just a static background. Type of camera shot can also give us a more heroic vibe or a panicking vibe depending on how you're filming it and the context of the scene. If we have, I don't know, superheroes or some policemen, we're going to be shooting from down under and we're going to be circling around it, it just makes them feel as if they are powerful. Whereas if we have, let's say, a kind of stressful scene or an argument, circling around them just creates a little bit more hectic feeling within that shot because we're seeing people arguing and at the same time the camera is moving around them. It kind of combines all together. And the final type of camera movement associated with a dolly is a dolly zoom. This is when you combine the movement of a dolly with a zoom. So there's two ways to do this. The first way is by pushing in and zooming out. By doing this, our foreground will stay the same, but our background will just expand. And the opposite is by pulling out our dolly, so going away from our subject, but at the same time zooming in. And what that does is it basically creates more emphasis on the foreground, so it kind of expands our foreground and shrinks the background. Both of them have their own different uses. It's really a very creative way to do it. And this one is also quite a strange effect in itself, and it's quite often found in thriller and horror movies. Now, even though a dolly is very effective when you want to basically get smooth footage on uneven ground, because you can just create rail tracks, it is quite a difficult thing to use because you need to actually have those rails and all this equipment to create one, and it's not useful, especially if you're a one-man crew. For that, you have a slider which mimics the same movements of pushing in and pulling out, and they can come in different sizes and shapes and also automated depending on your needs. Now, if a dolly or a slider allows us to move our camera forwards, backwards and side to side, what if we want to change the height of our camera? For that, we have a rig called the pedestal. This allows us to move our camera up and down, or in technical terms or in camera movement terms, this is called a boom. So you boom up and you boom down. I'm not sure why it's called after an explosion. Perhaps Michael Bay has something to do with this, because we know Michael Bay, everything from Michael Bay is... Anyways, the point is that this type of rig helps us to adjust the height of our camera, but also, and I believe this is depending on the rig, or maybe all of them can do that, they can also allow us to basically do the same thing as a tripod does. So panning, tilting, and zooming. So essentially it is a modified tripod with a easier system to change the height while we're shooting. So we can have a scene and we can then move and adjust the height as we go while we're shooting. This is very effective when we want to either showcase the environment, the same as tilting, or if we want to reveal something in a shot and we don't want to use a cut. It creates more tension because it takes time for us to reveal what we are showing, compared to if we're just doing a straight cut. Now, what if the pedestal does not give us enough height? Well, in that case, we need to call in the big boys, which is a crane, or also known as a camera jib. Now, this rig, well, it can be of different sizes, but usually it's quite big. And depending on your needs, it can go as high as, and lift your camera up as high as 1, 2, 3-story building, as you wish. And the interesting part about this one is that looking at its size, you would not think that it is so flexible. In other words, it can literally pull off any movement that we have already spoke about. I'm gonna put them over here, and the only one that is missing from this list is actually a camera roll. A camera roll is when you have your camera, imagine that it's pointing towards you guys, and you basically twist it upside down on its own axis. This shot is quite disorientating because literally everything's upside down, and we naturally do not really like this perspective. We want to keep it normal. You know, it's like when you're playing a racing game on your joystick, you know, and then you just need to tap it extra hard right into there because you think like it's gonna give you extra speed and you're gonna win the game, except that you just suck. Well, it's exactly that, you know, you are forcing your body naturally to do something completely different to normalize the situation. And it can be used also to change the balance of your shot. So for instance, this shot right here from The Dark Knight, twisting the camera to put Joker upright again, just shows us that now, even though he is captured by Batman, he still has the upper hand in here. Going back to the flexibility of a crane, if you want to have a static shot, no problem, just leave it at any height, make your shot. If you want to move from an establishing shot to your scene, just put it up and then slowly boom downwards. You can do this the opposite way, booming upwards, showing the more of the scene after a close-up of your characters. If you want to push in and pull out from an object or a subject, easy. If you want to tilt up and down or pan left or right, you can do that as well, because usually those cameras on the crane are remote controlled so that you have your shot always in focus, and also your camera is actually pointing at your character or your subject or object, whatever it is. Now if you want to track your subject, easy, just put your crane on a dolly and now you can track and truck. And if you want more speed, easy, just put the crane on a car and now we have a vehicle mount. And that brings us to the next type of camera rigs, which is vehicle mounts. Vehicle mounts are basically any types of contraption. It can be either a huge crane on a car, or it could be just something as simple as a suction cup with a let's say a GorillaPod plate on top of it that will allow you to mount a camera on it, and you can then stick it to on a car, on a bike, on a plane, whatever. The point is that you can attach a camera towards a vehicle. This is very handy when you're filming either vehicle related videos, for example car ads, or if you want to film a chase scene, for instance. We can add more energy by attaching a camera to a bike or a car to get a POV shot of the chase, because usually the chases are always shot with that crane that is on a car, but we can also give a more perspective or a POV shot from it. And another reason why we'd use a camera mount is to film dialogue in a car. So we attach a camera on the side of the mirror and now we can film the dialogue of the characters as they're driving along the road. Now if you put it on a plane or a helicopter, then you can get those nice aerial shots or some crazy stunts. For instance, this one from Mission Impossible, as far as I know, this was actually done and Tom Cruise did pull this trick out. Now putting a camera operator with a camera on the wing, that would just be very stupid, reckless and dangerous. So using a camera mount to lock your camera to the plane will allow you to then keep the operator safe and then let the stuntmen who are experts in this to do their job. Now in terms of camera movements, also there is flexibility. So if we have a whole crane, then we can basically use the flexibility of the crane to do all kinds of shots. If we are just attaching a camera on a vehicle, then we can either have some static shots recording the movement produced by the movement of the vehicle, or we can also do some tracking shots by attaching, for instance, a camera to the bumper of a car, and then we can follow another car in a chase. Now speaking of aerial shots, the next type of rig we have is our drones. Something that has been very popular in the recent years given the affordability of them and also the quality of the images that they produce. Now me personally, I have a DJI Mavic Mini. I still need to learn how to use that one though. And right now, even film industries have started to use more and more drones, and it's way cheaper than actually renting a helicopter, and you literally get the same result. Maybe you're not getting like a 6 or 8K shot, but you don't really need that. You can get a very nice cinematic shot with even a 1080p. It really depends on how you're using it. Now when it comes to the camera movements with a drone, you can make a static shot, you can pan, you can tilt, you can boom. Seriously, this sounds so weird when you say it, like you can boom. You can track and truck a subject, and also you can arc around your subject without ease. Actually, even those high-end drones, for instance DJI or Parrot, they have built-in tracking and arcing effects built in, so you don't even need to do anything, they can just do everything for you. Now moving directly from the sky all the way down to the water, we have the underwater housing. Basically this is a waterproof case where you put your camera inside, allows you to control your camera and to submerge it underwater, something that has been very popular with the GoPro cameras. However, with the film you have those huge casings for those big RE or RED cameras. Now, since it is usually handheld, even though it can be attached to a camera, you have all the flexibility and freedom of the shots you want to get. So once again, I'll put them all right here and you can see exactly what it can do. Basically all the 12 shots that we discussed. Now, speaking of handheld, now let's address the next gear on our list, which is our budget-friendly and readily available hands. These ones are used to make handheld footage, and the handheld footage is usually associated with a camera movement called random movement, aka shaking. Now, what I was very surprised to learn is that there are shots in the film that are intentionally made shaky. Now, I'm not speaking about action scenes, because obviously you would have to shake and move around the camera to hide the fake shots and to make it more chaotic, which is one of the reasons why you would use a handheld camera to shake. But also I found out, and it was interesting for me to learn, that you can use a camera shake to fake our presence within the shot. And the idea is that you're gonna slowly shake the camera while you're filming your scene, and that would mimic the way we see people if we are, let's say, on an uneven terrain and we're communicating with people. Usually if we're standing, then it's perfectly balanced, but then if we have an unreal terrain, then we can have a little bit of shakiness in our vision as well. So the camera movements kind of mimic that same idea, and that gives a more personal feel between the audience and the character. Super interesting. I never really thought about it this way. I always thought that shaking is very bad, but now it creates a new perspective towards things. And the opposite of shaky footage is stable footage. And this can be achieved using stabilizers. They come in different shapes and sizes, so you can have something as portable as a Ronin RS, or you can have something more complex like this DJI Ronin. And the point of it is that it's going to be counteracting the movements that our hands or our body is produced. And also stabilizers are implemented in cameras, in the, let's say, the crane, or even the drones, so that any kind of movement caused, let's say, by our hands or by the winds, right, does not really affect the quality of the image. And since this is handheld, once again we enjoy the flexibility of using all different shots. And actually the only shot that I think will be a little bit more difficult to pull off just using your hands would be the camera roll, whereas on a stabilizer there are some stabilizers like the Ronin ones that allow you to automatically move your camera and spin it, so that kind of assists you with that, and stabilizer becomes just wholesome. And finally, it's worth to mention robotics, or more specifically a motion control rig. Basically it is a crane or like a robotic arm with a camera attached to it, and you can key in the movement that you want it to make, and it's gonna make the same movement like 1,000 times perfectly. And this is something that is extremely useful for VFX, and also it can be used for time lapses, so you don't need to sit there and make micro changes in the position of your camera as it makes those photos literally every second. I mean, it's ridiculous. So you can have the camera, this robotic camera, do everything for you, and you just need to leave it and do its job, and then you can just go and get a cup of tea or coffee, whatever you like. And that's it, the shot list is done. I know, a lot of information and a long video, however it was needed. Now not only do we know the different types of shots, we also know the different types of gear that is used to make those shots, and that already gave me a few ideas of what I want to add to my wish list. As always, thank you for watching, do drop a like, consider subscribing, and I see you in the next one. Bye.